Alright, this is my review of the Manchester wood stove from Hearthstone. I'd advise you guys not to buy this one. The reason is, I'll go into in just a moment, of my problems that I'm having from the manufacturer and things like that. It's just been a complete nightmare. Overall, the stove looks really nice. It's very classy looking. It looks good. Heat's a large size. The 2,400 square feet is what they say. Does quite well. We have it set up through the back to go to the chimney. And we have the actual little temperature gauge for the stovepipe works out. The stove never really sees more than 500. It always stays right in about here. And it heats the house up pretty well. Now, the problems that I'm having with the wood stove itself is, and this is a known problem on this model, it's not just me, there's actually a lot out there. The technician that came out was just here yesterday to replace some parts under warranty. But the problem we're having is on the inside, you have that little tiny heat plate right back in here, the shield, and that's for the side loading door, okay? Now, the problem I have is, well, let me give you the walkthrough of what's going on. So, the door basically fell apart. And you see that, how it slides up and down, that little metal piece? You can see the bottom here, how it's loose. There's a hinge that goes down in there and it has two screws. Now, this is the new plate that was flat that they put yesterday. And it's already starting to warp again. That metal plate there was actually warped to the point where it was almost like a good shaped U, a warp plate. And when that plate warped, what happened was it pushed the screws out of the threads on the main body itself. And when I called Fireplace Village, the place that I bought it through, they just threw parts at it blindly. They never came out to take a look at it to see what it needed. Didn't do anything about that. And they're a real pain to deal with as well. We'll go on that in just a minute. But also, the finish that you pay a lot of money for is actually all chipped up. You know, the finish is pretty much ruined, and you can't really redo that yourself. So if you were going to buy this stove, I would say don't get the actual enamel finish. It looks really nice, but the problem is you can't touch it up yourself. There's nothing you can do about it. They don't have anything for that. But if you go with the black one, like I probably should have in the, before instead of this one, you can buy the can of the stove paint and just spray paint it, touch it up, looks fine. You don't get the option with that one. Another issue I have with this stove, which is not the big deal, but the bottom down here has a little ashtray, an ash pan. Comes out pretty easily. You got your damper, closed, full open. And now there's two grates in this that actually slide back and forth. They go front and back. A lot of times with these ones, they don't really line up very well, so the airflow between the grates from the bottom coming up, everything else is really staggered and it clogs a lot, so you're constantly taking your fork and poking it and clearing an area so the air can flow up and breathe better. But aside from that, it's got the lime or the soapstone and it still stays pretty warm. But the main issue is the side loading door. It's a known problem. There's lots of people out there having this problem, whether it's the wrong gauge steel or temp or whatever, but for some reason that piece of metal is warping and causing all kinds of problems. Now, I bought this through Fireplace Village, which based on my experience, I'll never buy anything from them again, and I strongly advise other people not to. This is in the Bedford, New Hampshire store and the Amherst store. Originally, I bought this stove in, I think it was September of 2013. We just bought the house. We're doing a bunch of renovations. We didn't actually start using this until we moved in until like October, so it sat for a while not being used. About early December, we had a problem with the door. It fell off, so I called them. That was on December 17th. I called Fireplace Village back, and they had messed up, they told me, and never put the order through to get the parts, to replace the parts and everything else. I sent them pictures, sent them photos. They just ordered the parts to replace the door. They never came out to look at it and see what it needed. And this is kind of important because it doesn't matter what business you're in. You don't just throw parts at something without looking at it and seeing what it needs. Because then they finally put the order through, and then about a month and a half later, they get the parts in. Okay, so I've been waiting this whole time and just waiting and waiting, calling them, seeing what's going on. A month and a half later, they get the parts to replace the door. And then through Fireplace Village in Bedford, I call them to see, hey, what's the status? They never called me to told me they had the parts. Never told me they were scheduling a time for a guy to come out and do it. Never called me the day before to let they were going to know. I've had to constantly contact them and initiate what's going on. In fact, right now I've called the place to say, hey, you know what? You guys ordered parts, but you guys didn't order the replacement screws from the pictures I sent to you guys that were stripped. Okay, so now the guy came out to replace the new panel, put it in there, and he didn't even have the parts to fix it because the door doesn't seal. It just hangs right here, okay? That's the customer care that you're going to get from Fireplace Village. Now, there may be some people that had great service, but you know what? I've had horrible service. And, you know, are you going to be the next customer that has horrible service? I don't know. I sure know that I am in that situation. And so I called yesterday to talk to Rich, the owner over there, and he said that he was going to try and get out there by this next week on Tuesday to go to Oberson Hardware to see if he can find some machine screws that would work, and then he'd probably schedule another time to come back out here and, you know, and fiddle with it or something like that. So meanwhile, I've sent an email out to Hearthstone, the manufacturer themselves, and see what exactly is going on their end and what they can do, whether they can send out a rep and try and resolve this issue. Because as far as I'm concerned, Fireplace Village in New Hampshire is actually probably one of the worst places to buy a wood stove from. Because I don't know if it's the quality or if it's Hearthstone themselves. I'm waiting on a response from them to these issues. But from Fireplace Village standpoint, you know, let's say fine, you know, they're doing great and they're doing that and they can come out and service the warranties. But if I got to wait a month or a month and a half to get a warranty part fixed, you know, I'd rather go with a different fireplace company that could actually service my warranty and do the repairs in a timely order.